On today's show, did the Phoneix Suns make the right move trading for Bradley Beal? That's all the Wizards could get? We'll talk about that and more on today's Locked On NBA with the great Howard Beck.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome. You are locked on to the NBA. My name is Nick Angstadt, host of the Locked On Mavericks podcast. Thanks for being part of the show and making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. We have a show for you on every single team, daily, all throughout this offseason, through the draft, through free agency, through summer league, and into the season. So click the link in the description below to find the show that covers your team. Be an everydayer, subscribe or follow for free to this show. Just search Locked On NBA wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100. The promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. And joining me, legend, NBA, Locked On NBA insider, writer at GQ, overall NBA media legend. It is my honor to say the three most important words in niche basketball podcasting. What up, Beck?
What up, Nick? Good to see you, man. Been a few long weeks of hanging out with David Locke. Nice to see you again.
Long weeks, I guess, is a good way to put it. Today, we'll talk about something David Locke said couldn't happen, and that's another super team in the NBA.
As long as we're taking shots at the namesake of this network, we might as well just hit all of them.
We will talk about the Bradley Beal trade on the Suns side, what it means for this team. Are they a title contender now? Some people have them as the title favorites. Did Matt Ishbia just say F it to the new CBA? And what does that mean for their team going forward? What do they do next? And then we'll also talk about the Wizards side of this. Was this really the best that the Wizards could do? Did they do well just to get out of the Beal contract? I also want to talk about the connection between the Bartlesteins, with Beal's agent being Bartlestein the dad, Mark Bartlestein, and the CEO of the Suns. And I'm curious Beck's thoughts on that connection and what does that mean for the NBA and for them. Let's start, though, with the Suns side of things. Howard, is Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal a core that is an instant title contender?
The easy answer is yes, because they already were before they made the deal. Durant, Booker, Ayton, Chris Paul were crowned as title contenders the second they acquired Kevin Durant, albeit with a bunch of caveats about roster construction and defense and depth and all these things that reared their heads in the playoffs when they got spanked. So, they were before the Beal trade, and they are now. But being a contender and having being favorites are two different things, right? I always said last season, when they got Kevin Durant, I was not ready to say they were the favorites in the West. I said they were among the favorites in the West. And I think it's the same thing now. Bradley Beal is an upgrade of sorts, but you're losing playmaking and all the other things that come with Chris Paul in the process. And the fact is, and we'll get to this, but Nick, they didn't address any of their real needs. Scoring was not the problem. Having max salaried players who do a lot with the ball in their hands was not the problem. They already had a couple of those guys at a very elite level in Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. So sure, they're a title contender. They deserve to be discussed along with the rest of them. But here's some caveats real quick before we get to the rest of it. They do still need a bench. They do still need depth, period. They've got 5 guys under contract. I don't know who their point guard is. I don't know who's guarding the other team's best player on a night-to-night basis, the other team's best perimeter player, I should say. I don't know if Deandre Ayton is staying or going, and we'll get to that. I don't know who's guarding Nikola Jokic when they eventually have to deal with the Nuggets again in the playoffs. More caveats. I'm concerned about Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal's health because they never play full seasons. I don't know that they're until we see the rest of, they have many more moves to make, right? We are going to judge this way prematurely because there will be more moves. They have an entire roster to fill out. But as of right now, do I think that this core of the Suns is better than the defending champion Denver Nuggets? No. Are they better than the reconstituted, revamped, and still probably moves of their own to make this summer Lakers and Warriors and Clippers? I don't know. Kings and Grizzlies deserve to be discussed when we're talking about the elite teams in the West too, because, those were the second and third best teams this past season. Does just adding Bradley Beal vault the Suns over all of these teams? Maybe, but there's a lot more the Suns have to do. And by the way, these other teams are not standing still either.
Yeah, you look at these three guys and you're like, okay, they kind of all do similar things. You think, what were the things that the Suns needed to add, what the Suns needed to do? They needed, on offense, they needed to add some variety. They needed to add some three-point shooting. Bradley Beal averaged 4.4 three-point attempts per game last year. Chris Paul averaged 4.4 three-point attempts per game last year. So you're not really adding more volume shooting. I think that Bradley Beal will get better three-point shots with this Suns team now, with Devin Booker and Kevin Durant creating. And each one of those, like the Wizards tried Bradley Beal at like a pseudo point guard kind of role because they really haven't had any creators either. So I think Bradley Beal will get better shots than he did in Washington. But I think each one of them, they're kind of doing similar to what the Pelicans kind of do, is just run like, all right, we've got three guys that can kind of all play make and handle the ball a little bit, and we won't really have like a traditional point guard. But like you said, they didn't really address any of their other needs as far as defense. And is Deandre Ayton just going to get them, you know, is he enough to get them a couple of other role players, a couple of other like players to fill out the rest of this roster? And our minimum's enough, because that's kind of what they're stuck with at this point. Were you surprised though that the Suns and Matt Ishbia, the owner, went down this route, that they went with the big three route that, you know, that we thought was over, that David Locke declared no one will do this, and the new second apron is coming? We'll talk about that in a second. But were you just surprised that they went down this big three route instead of trying something else?
Yeah, as I have said on this channel before, to the namesake host of the podcast, because we've argued about this twice over the last month. And, you know, look, David's got a very supportable position, but my position has always been, I don't care what the rules are. The NBA teams, NBA GMs, NBA owners are always going to try to build super teams because that's what they do, because there is no substitute for elite talent. And if you've got one superstar, you're going to try to get a second. And if you've got two, you're going to try to get a third, if the rules still allow for it. And while the rules are making it harder and harder, the CBA and the new penalties coming in are going to make it harder and harder to sustain this. It doesn't mean teams won't try. The other piece of this, of course, is, well, will it work? It's got to be the right big three, right? Like, ever since we started this big three era back with the Celtics in 2008, or in 07, the offseason of 07, 08, when they got Ray Allen and Kevin Garnett to go with Paul Pierce, that was a perfectly fitting big three of guys who did not have overlapping skill sets, who were all at an age and a stage of their career where they were willing to sacrifice to make each other better. They had a really good supporting cast too, which we often overlook. And then when the Miami Heat, you know, LeBron says, well, I can't get past the Celtics, so I got to go form my own big three. Again, LeBron, Wade, that was a little bit janky at first. They figured it out because they were both, you know, primary ball handler types, scorer, playmaker combos. But they also had Chris Bosh, who was this really elite, versatile defender and became this stretch five. The pieces fit. The problem with the super team now, aside from all the consequences that come with it under the new CBA, losing all these different mechanisms to add players, higher tax rates, all this other stuff. The problem is when you do it without really thinking it through, if you're just getting the next available star, they might not actually fit. I don't think these three are that. They are complementary in theory. I don't think they're that complementary. I don't think that if you were going to get a third max player to go alongside Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, Bradley Beal's not the guy I would have picked. And is he a shooter? He has been in his career, but let me just hit this real quick while I'm on the subject of fit. Beal's a shooter who hasn't shot well from three in like 3 years. Like, he's shot about average. His first 6 seasons in the league, Bradley Beal shot between about like 38 to 40%, meaning he was an elite three-point shooter. The last 5 years, though, these are his three-point percentages: 35, 35, 35, 30, 36. He's been from three-point range. Now, has he had to create more? Has he had to maybe force some? Has the fact that his volume of three-point attempts were way up in some of those years affected it? Sure, but I know he'll get better shots playing off of Booker and Durant, but he also likes having the ball in his hands a lot. So you got to navigate that. And maybe all of his catch and shoot threes, maybe he'll shoot at a really high rate because he's just going to be wide open all the time. But I'm not encouraged by his recent track record. But yeah, the super team era, you can never bury it entirely. Like, the era, I feel like, is over. We are in an era of ensemble casts winning titles, one superstar with a bunch of really good players around them. That's what it's been for the last several years, sometimes 2 stars, but not 3 or 4. But as I've said on this pod before, teams will keep trying. Matt Ishbia clearly wants to keep trying. Matt Ishbia has Isaiah Thomas as one of his chief advisors. Isaiah Thomas, I watched firsthand in New York when I was covering the Knicks, grabbing every max player he could possibly get his hands on. That was his MO. So I'm not saying this is Isaiah's doing, but I'm not surprised that an owner taking advice from Isaiah Thomas would go down a route like this and just spend like crazy and try to get as many marquee names as possible and figure out the rest later.
Coming up, let's get into what this means for the Suns going forward, not just this year, but in 2 years from now. Are they really going to regret this move? We'll talk about that and more on the Wizards coming up. But before we do, let me tell you about Ibotta. If you are watching your closet grow after purchasing all of last season's trends, how about watching your cash grow back with each purchase? Ibotta is a special kind of app that helps you get cash back with every purchase you make. You can earn cash back on every shopping trip. Ibotta gives you cash back on hundreds of grocery items, from produce to personal care to pantry goods. Either link your loyalty account or upload a receipt after you shop and get cash back. There's a lot of other apps and things that'll give you points, but they give you real cash back. Other apps give you points that don't really amount to much. With Ibotta, you get real cash back that you can cash out to your bank, PayPal, or gift cards right now. Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying it by using the code LOCKED when you register. Go to the App Store, go to Google Play, download the free Ibotta app, use the code LOCKED. That's Ibotta, I-B-O-T-T-A, Ibotta, in the Google Play or App Store. Again, use the promo code LOCKED to try Ibotta and get $5 for free today. Thanks, everybody, for listening to Locked On NBA, making us part of your day, being part of the show, and supporting. We appreciate each and every one of you. This week is the best. We've got the ultimate mock draft posted all over the place. Howard Beck is part of that, critiquing, destroying our trades that we made. Each of us as hosts, I host the Locked On Mavericks show. I made the pick for the Mavericks. Our other hosts made picks for their teams. We have our experts like Rafael Barlow of NBA Big Board, talking about those picks and things. It's an incredible, incredible program on this channel, wherever you're listening to this, as well as the Locked On NBA Big Board feed. So go listen to that. Incredible draft stuff to get you up to date on the NBA draft this week. All right, Howard Beck. We're talking about the Bradley Beal trade. It's the big thing that happened. One of the things that is going to be the most talked about this trade specifically, and we mentioned it and touched on it a couple times, is this new CBA, the new collective bargaining agreement, the new second apron or the new second luxury tax bracket that has now been created with this when this new CBA eventually gets ratified. I mean, we don't even have it yet, I don't think. Did we, as the media, overhype this new CBA and this new second apron and all the restrictions that'll come with it? Or did Matt Ishbia, the Suns owner, just look at it and say, you know what? Screw it. Let's just do it. I want to have 3 stars together. He's got Isaiah Thomas in his ear, over to the side with his whispers, hey, we should just do this. We can get it done. We've got this, really unique connection to Bradley Beal, and we can do this and get it done.
We did not overhype anything. I mean, the league did what they did in this new CBA for a purpose. They were trying to keep the Warriors and the Clippers in particular from going off the rails, spending hundreds of millions of dollars beyond any other team. And because the luxury taxes alone weren't enough to dissuade Steve Ballmer or Joe Lacob from spending wildly, they created all these new mechanisms. We're getting closer and closer to what is essentially a hard cap in the NBA. I'm not going to go into all the details on this pod because it would bore everybody to death. But the fact is, in addition to all the luxury taxes, now you're going to lose certain salary cap exceptions. You're going to lose the ability to aggregate players in a trade, aggregate their contracts. You're going to lose all these other mechanisms that, among other things, the Warriors would not have been able to sign Dante DiVincenzo, for instance, under these rules. So it will start to hurt. It doesn't mean, again, that nobody was going to try to create a super team or that nobody was going to spend wildly in the belief that they could beat the system and win anyway. And look, the Suns, if they can get a bunch of guys to just sign with them on minimum deals or whatever cap exceptions they still have available to them, it could still work, perhaps. But I am, as you've probably picked up on, I'm very, very skeptical. I'm not a believer in what they're doing here. I don't think this was the right move. I reserve some judgment in that we'll see who else they're able to add. We'll see. I believe they absolutely need to trade DeAndre Ayton if they weren't planning to, before. They certainly should be now, because you can break up his salary into multiple other players to kind of try to fill out this roster, because you don't have that many other mechanisms to do so. And while Phoenix is a nice place to live and play, and it's nice to be able to compete for titles next to Durant and Booker if you can find your way there, not everybody's in a position where they want to sacrifice salary just to go ring chase. So good luck finding enough guys who want to do that. But here's the quick, just rough math. The projected salary cap for next season, and this will change in the next couple of weeks as they do the books, but the projected cap is $134 million. The salary of Booker, Durant, Ayton, and Beal combined is $162. So they're almost $30 million over the cap just with 4 players, including Ayton. This projected tax line is $162. So they're at the projected tax line just with 4 players. And the only other supporting cast members who are still even on the roster right now are Campaign and Ish Wainwright. They got a lot of work to do. A lot of work to do. And by the way, because we didn't hit this earlier, and I do want to squeeze this in, like, 2 of your 3 guys are always hurt. Kevin Durant has played 137 out of 236 games over the last 3 seasons. He has played in 58% of all games, meaning he's missed 42% of all games over the last 3 seasons. And that shouldn't be a shocker. He's going to be 35 in September, and he had Achilles surgery. But he's missed 42% of all games over the last 3 seasons. That's Kevin Durant. Bradley Beal has missed 33% of all games, despite not having torn an Achilles and despite being 5 years younger than Kevin Durant. Bradley Beal's played 207 out of 308 over the last 4 years. So that's 67% he's played in. And Beal's turning 30 next week. By the way, Devin Booker himself, younger, healthier, and I'm not overly concerned, but I'll just note, he played 68 out of 82 games 2 years ago and 53 out of 82 this past season. That's 74% of games over the last 2 years that he's played in. I mean, this is not exactly the most solid, reliable crew. I would have major concerns, but this is what happens when you go all in on a Kevin Durant, as Ishbia did like 3 seconds after he took control of the team back in February. Now you're all in, and all you can do from there is keep doubling down. And that's what this is about, right? This is really about the desperation of saying, well, we've got a window with Kevin Durant, and it may last 1 year, it may last 2, maybe 3, but Kevin Durant's going to be 35 in September. So you don't have it's not a big runway, and they've already sent out every draft pick imaginable. So this is kind of like, well, we're already all in. Might as well go in a little further.
We dug the hole. We're going to get out of it. We'll just go further and further into the crevasse, as Jack Donaghy would say on 30 Rock. As far as where this roster goes, I agree with you. I don't think we overhyped the new CBA. The thing you have to remember is the new CBA starts July 1st, and these limitations and things don't happen until you're in this second apron for 2 years. So they have at least a little bit of a runway this year, and I guess a little bit like going into next offseason to try and make some kind of move. So they do have that kind of flexibility. So they're really, like you said, going for this run right now with Kevin Durant, as long as they think that it'll be open. And then 2-3 years from now, we'll start looking, dang, this team all of a sudden can't do anything. And I don't envy Brendan Clean on Locked On Suns trying to figure out, all right, what moves can we make? We can't aggregate, meaning we can't take 2 players and trade for 1. Can we do buyout guys? Like, there's just all kinds of restrictions and things that they won't be able to do. But now with this team, where do you go and where do you go forward with this specific squad? So, like you said, they have Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton under contract. Ish Wainwright, I think, has a team option for like $1.9 million. They have Cameron Payne on like a $6.5 million non-guaranteed. So, like, those are the only players on the roster, sort of. They have the bird rights to re-sign Torrey Craig, Bismack Biyombo, Josh Okogie, Terrence Ross, TJ Warren. They have restricted rights on Jock Landale, Darius Baisley, Saban Lee. Like, those are the type of players they could try and bring back. They'll probably get some minimum guys. They seem to always do. But in your opinion, what happens next with this roster? Is DeAndre Ayton on the roster to start? Is he the one that gets moved to try and add some depth to this team?
There's this theory that because Monty Williams is gone, well, problem solved in terms of the DeAndre Ayton issue. But I don't think it's just Monty Williams versus DeAndre Ayton over the last couple of years with the Suns. I think it's more like the organization versus DeAndre Ayton. And clearly he has not realized all the potential that they hoped he would when they took him with the number 1 overall pick over Luka Doncic. And so, he's on a max deal. He's making $32 million right now. When you already have 3 other max guys, now that you're adding Beal, it makes more sense than ever to send out Ayton. Like, yes, you need a big. Yes, you need defense. Yes, you need size. But the problem is they've got so much money now tied up in their 3 scorers that you almost have to break up DeAndre Ayton's contract into smaller pieces. And again, I do think that it's the Suns as an organization that have probably soured on him more so than it was just about the coach. I would expect they trade DeAndre Ayton for an array of stuff that helps them replenish around their new core of Durant, Booker, Beal. Could be wrong, but I'd be shocked. And if they didn't do it. And the thing is too, like, depending on what you get back and how many players and how many different pieces, how many contracts, it also gives you more flexibility down the line. So now you can flip any one of those guys that you've just gotten for somebody else. You've got these smaller pieces that are more movable. But I think it's inevitable. I think a DeAndre Ayton trade is inevitable.
Yeah, I see them doing a similar trade to what the Mavericks did with Kristaps Porzingis and splitting him into 2 pieces, maybe hopefully getting somebody back better than Davis Bertans. But Spencer Dinwiddie, like, that would be a good to split up that contract into multiple pieces, do something like that. That seems to be their next move. What is the next move for the Wizards? Coming up, we'll talk about that and why was that the best that the Wizards could get for Bradley Beal. We'll talk about all that with Howard Beck coming up. But before we do, let me tell you about Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. You can go to Prize Picks right now. There's all kinds of stuff it's the NBA offseason, but there's still baseball going on. There's still PGA for as long as you want to be interested and involved in the PGA. There's soccer. There's all kinds of different things. Tennis that you can get, and you just go on, you pick 4 to 6 players and more or less on their projections. So, for example, if you want to go in and you can pick total strikeouts, you can pick 4.5 for a player, hit more or less. And if you're feeling that they're going to get more strikeouts than that, hit more. If you're feeling like they're going to get less, hit less. You put down a couple of those, and then you hit more. Let's say more. I put down $20. I can win 45 just on 3 entries. If I put down 50, I can win 112.50 on that. There's all kinds of fun stuff you can do. You can combine sports as well. And right now, you can get a 100% deposit match up to $100. So if you deposit $100, you'll get $100 free to use on Prize Picks if you use the promo code Locked On. Again, that's Prize Picks. Download the app or go to prizepicks.com. All right, Beck, let's get into the Wizards side of this. There's a lot of talk about the Suns. They will be the one on all the graphics, on all the things, on all the sports shows. But the Wizards side of this matters too, because this team now has a direction. I think for the first time in a long time. I listened to Brandon Scott and Ed Oliver on Locked On Wizards, and they were upset about what they got in the trade, but they were relieved that they're at least going in a direction. But on the Beal trade specifically, was this really the best the Wizards could get in a deal for Bradley Beal?
It depends on what your goals are. And look, let's start with the obvious. His no trade clause makes things really, really tough. And if Wizards fans or Wizards podcasters are upset with the return, don't be upset with what just happened. Be upset with what has happened for the last several years. Re-signing Beal multiple times, not trading him all the other times that you should have when his value was higher and his contract was lower and he was probably still healthier. Trading him before he had a no-trade clause. Not giving him a no-trade clause. The mistake of giving him that last extension or new contract, max deal with a no-trade clause. Like that, they were hamstrung. Michael Winger and his new front office were hamstrung by the old administration. And I put that blame mostly on Ted Leonsis, the owner, by the way, not so much on Tommy Shepard. Leonsis had an agenda. His agenda was keep Beal at all costs. This is my guy. We're never parting with him. And then he finally relented and let his new front office do what needed to be done. This is a house cleaning, folks. It's a house cleaning, and house cleanings are ugly. You don't get your choice of great, a new couch to replace the worn out old couch that you're sending out the door.
Sometimes you just got to throw the Bowflex away and you can't sell it and recoup it for anything, right? Like you just got to get it out.
I can only imagine how many places that those things are still collecting dust in the back of somebody's apartment. So they are paying for past sins. This trade itself is not a sin, because the goal, when you ask, was this the right trade? Was this the best trade? Was this the best return they could get? It depends on what your goals are. To me, this signals that what the goal was let's send him out for the as cap friendly a deal as possible. Give us the best chance at a fresh start as possible. They weren't prioritizing high level players to try to compete now. Why would they? They've got a draft pick that it's protected through, I think, 12 or 14 next season to the Knicks. As long as they're bad, they'll keep it. And if they're bad the next couple of years, they'll still keep it. So you're banking on being bad. And let's just address the other obvious thing. I should have started with this. Bradley Beal's trade value is not based on how good a player Bradley Beal was or still could be. It's based on the fact that dude is making an immense amount of money. He is owed $208 million over the next 4 years, topping out at $57 million in the 2026-27 season. Ugh. Even if he didn't have a no-trade clause. Do you know how many teams actually would have been eager to get Beal and give up good stuff to get him? Not very many. Maybe not any, in fact. So there weren't going to be great offers anyway, because people aren't bidding for what Bradley Beal, the player, is. They're bidding on Bradley Beal and a 4-year, $208 million contract that far exceeds his abilities. And they're bidding on the fact that he's got a no-trade clause that comes with him. So now you're stuck with the fact that if he doesn't work out for you, or if he gets hurt, you can't move him without his approval either. So you have to judge the trade based on all those things. And oh, by the way, the trade's not complete yet. And if they're going to rope in another team, a third team, a fourth team, reroute Chris Paul, maybe reroute Landry Shamet, they'll probably end up with more stuff out of this. And they'll have way better cap flexibility. And I would say, if I'm reading tea leaves, the main goal here was just simply jettison the contract, give ourselves the ability and the flexibility to start over fresh, because this thing was going nowhere. So look, it's a salary dump. That's effectively what this is. It's a reset button, and you have to view it through that lens.
One of the more interesting angles of this, for me, has been Bradley Beal's agent is Mark Bartelstein. His son, Josh Bartelstein, is the Suns CEO. Someone that has connections around the league and knows these things more than I definitely do. Does this happen more often than we realize? Is this tampering? Is this something that raised a red flag to you? That Beal has this no trade clause, that he obviously has an agenda to get to Phoenix, and maybe some of that is because of this Bartelstein connection. And he said, all right, I'm going there no matter what. If you get a better offer from, say, the Heat, I'm going to say no to that with my no trade clause and say I don't want to go there, that I'll only go to the Suns because of this. Does that connection, does that raise a red flag at all, or is that just the cost of doing business in the NBA now?
It doesn't concern me in the least. If Josh Bartelstein were still, I think he was with the Pistons before, if he were still in Detroit, Bradley Beal's probably still a Sun today. Like that's as simple as it gets, right? Bradley Beal's going where Bradley Beal wanted to go, not where Mark Bartelstein, his agent, wanted him to go, or where Mark Bartelstein's son, Josh Bartelstein, who works for the Suns, wanted him to go. Like it's irrelevant in this case. It was relevant in the case of Jalen Brunson going to the Knicks for a variety of reasons.
Maybe I'm just hurt personally.
I mean, that was different, right? The Knicks hired Rick Brunson, his father, to be an assistant coach. Leon Rose was Rick Brunson's agent since, like the 1970s or something. And there were all these other connections, and Brunson was a free agent or a pending free agent. Beal was under contract and has a no trade clause, which means he can pick his team anyway via trade. Also, by the way, Beal did not initiate this whole thing. The Wizards did. The Wizards' new front office were the ones who just said, hey, Brad, time to go, buddy. Can you help us out? And then they gave him and Mark Bartelstein permission to go seek offers from teams that Beal was interested in going to, because there's no point in talking to teams that he's not interested in going to, because he's got the no trade clause. So once you, and this is the ultimate, kind of explanation for all of this, no matter how many Bartelsteins are involved, no matter what people's perceptions may be, it's not tampering, because the Wizards specifically went to Beal and Mark Bartelstein and said, guys, go find an offer, or go find you are free to discuss with teams that might be interested in you. And then we'll figure out the components of a deal. So no, this is a big nothing burger. And I don't even like the phrase nothing burger. It's annoying to me. I hate when other people say it. I can't believe I just said it, but it is the easiest catch-all for this whole thing.
And that burger is, oh man. I won't even keep using it because you don't like the phrase. What is now for the Wizards? What's your confidence meter in this new front office, Michael Winger and crew, in navigating a rebuild, like you said, basically starting at zero? They've got to figure out what to do with Porzingis and Kuzma, but they kind of don't have anything, and they're starting at zero.
So, pretty clear to me, as I say, that the agenda under Michael Winger and his new front office is basically tear this sucker down, blow it up, and it's the right move. If ever a team needed to be blown up, it was this one. But it does have some implications for Kuzma and Porzingis, right? So Kuzma's an outright free agent. You still don't want to lose a really good player for nothing if he can be an asset for you. So I say if you can find a way to re-sign him or use him in a sign and trade, you do it. And if you're re-signing him, you're doing it to trade him down the line anyway. But it's basically don't let a guy walk for nothing. Kuzma's a guy who will be in certain demand this summer, but he could also just sign with somebody outright. He's under no obligation to participate in a sign and trade if there are teams with cap room that want to sign him. But maybe there are teams that he would rather go to that don't have cap room, and the Wizards can help him get there, and they can pull some more assets back. So they should keep that option open. Similar with Porzingis, it's a little different because he's got a player option for $36 million. If Porzingis opts in, you're absolutely putting him on the trade market immediately at $36 million for 1 year, expiring deal. Coming off maybe his best season. Plenty of teams would love to have Porzingis right now, especially on an expiring. If he opts out, it's a little more complicated. Do you sign him outright yourself and again use him later down the line in a trade? Do you try to immediately orchestrate a sign and trade with him as a free agent? Because again, a lot of teams out there I think would love to have Porzingis on the right deal, right? Probably not at the $36 million he's making now, but he's at that stage of his career with his injury history where he's coming off his best season. He might want to opt out of the 36 to make less next season, but lock in more years, right? So opt out and sign for, 4 years, 100, 4 years, 120 or something. It's still a lower salary than what he would make next season and still more attractive perhaps to any suitors out there. But good for him by locking in more years and protecting against his own, knees and other things going south. So they've got options with both those guys. I think the smart teams protect their assets. And Michael Winger's really, really smart. I know he's a name that most fans are not familiar with. He was working in the Clippers front office all these last several years. The guy is a salary cap maestro. He's really creative. He's really smart about maneuvering. All those deals that they made to build up to where they could get Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, and then those deals themselves. A lot of Michael Winger involved in all that. And Will Dawkins, who he brought in from the Thunder, I don't know, but is very, very well regarded and has had a great reputation during his time in Oklahoma. So I think my confidence in this staff, my confidence is really high in this staff. I think they're doing the right things. They've also got the 8th pick in the draft this week. I mentioned they owe that 2024 first. It's bounced all over the place. The Knicks currently have that pick for 2024, but it's protected 1 through 12. Almost guaranteed the Wizards are keeping that pick now. It's protected 1 through 10 the next year. The Wizards are probably still keeping it. Yeah. And then it's 1 through 8 protected in 2026. And depending on how quickly they move out of this rebuild, we'll see. Maybe they finally lose that pick in 2026. But if so, it means they've actually become at least a competent team. And if they're just in the lottery the next 3 years high enough, then that pick just becomes 2 seconds. Being bad is the right agenda. It means keeping their pick. And it also just means giving themselves a chance to kind of reset this whole thing. And that's clearly what they're doing. So it's going to be a painful path. There's no question. They might be like a 17-win season 70-win team next season. But sometimes you have to go backwards to go forwards in this league, and this is the right move.
For more on that, go listen to Locked On Suns, Locked On Wizards. We have a 5-day-a-week show on your team every day. Go check it out. Click the link in the description. Howard Beck will be on with a bunch of different shows this week and through the rest of the offseason. And so, Howard, thanks so much for joining us. And then we'll be back tomorrow with Matt Moore, David Ramil, talking about more on the NBA and all through this great week of the draft. Guys, thanks so much for listening to us on Locked On NBA. Boom.